Hello and welcome back to the Azerbaijan YouTube channel. It is Harry here, and today it is time for a new video, obviously because, well, it always is a new video. But it is on a subject which I have been wanting to talk about for a while now, I think, but just haven't had the opportunity to do so. So for those of you who somehow don't know, especially those of you who don't know much about football or with whom I haven't really discussed football for that much, the team that I support is Manchester City. Before you say to me,
"Oh Harry, you're clearly such a massive glory hunter supporting the really high up teams in the league. You clearly know nothing about football."
hold your horses, lads. Hold your horses. I started supporting the greatest team on earth, no bias, in 2005, 3 years before the takeover of the club by Sheikh Mansour and the Abu Dhabi group. However, many of those who know me will be aware that I'm completely unbiased when it comes to my support of the club, and I know when my team has got it wrong, especially with FFP regulations hitting the club quite hard. If you want to watch a video on that topic which I have made, a link will be left in the description so you can have a watch of it. However, even with all this in mind, I still feel as though it is my duty, with the platform that I have, to counteract a few myths posited by fans of other clubs online, be it through jealousy or just for the purposes of mocking the club. I understand that most of them are meant purely in jest, and I do find it funny when the ways of bringing up the same rehashed points over and over again are done in unique and original ways. One that I recall was a picture that my friend sent to me a few years back saying things that didn't exist pre-2004, listing a load of websites and apps, and of course, Man City fans. The supposed lack of fans and history are two things which crop up repeatedly, so in this video I'm essentially writing a counter-protest to those things which shouldn't really be taken so seriously. But here we are. Here is my video outlining the wonderful and colourful history of Manchester City and dispelling the myth that they have no history. Manchester City were founded in 1880 under the name St Mark's, after the church whose members founded the club. But there were two positive aspects of the club's birth. The first was that one of the three founding members of the club was a woman by the name of Anna Connell, the daughter of the church rector of St Mark's, meaning that City were one of the few clubs at the time who could count a female as part of the original committee, in a time when of course sexism and discrimination was still more rife than ever. The second was that it was actually instigated for humanitarian reasons, as the church wanted to cut down on the rampant violence, unemployment and alcoholism which was sweeping through this region by giving the men the activity of football to pass the time. They moved to High Road in 1887 to coincide with their latest name change of Ardwick, but their first game went a bit awry as their to-be opponents, Salford, failed to turn up. However, after financial difficulties arose with the club in the second division, the final name change was registered. They were meant to represent the city of Manchester, and so they called themselves eventually Manchester City in 1894. Interestingly, they originally became the dominant force within the city, as Manchester United, Newton Heath at this point, were actually floundering in the depths of the second tier and lower first tier. City, meanwhile, was shooting for the stars and were the first team from the city to win a major trophy in 1904 with the FA Cup, as Billy Meredith, a maverick winger whom I will do a video on soon, scored the winning goal. However, it is widely speculated that Meredith was actually offside, so I guess we have been receiving helping hands from referees for ages. Their first piece of shady business arrived in 1905 to 1906, 102 years before they were taken over by a despotic regime of a country. But again, we move on. The club became embroiled in a match-fixing scandal as Meredith attempted to bribe the Aston Villa captain, Alec Leake, £10 to throw the game so that City could win the league. Leake refused and Villa won, and he leaked the information, wonderful considering his name, to the public. As a result of this, Meredith was suspended for a year. It was then alleged by Meredith himself that City were making illegal payments to their players, not falling in line with the strict £4 per wage limit imposed by the FA at the time. Clearly, this was a harbinger of what was to come. City were investigated, found out and fined, with 17 staff members, including some of the players and the manager, also fined and suspended, some for life. In 1920, City were the first team to be visited by a reigning monarch outside of London, as George V went to see them play Liverpool at Hyde Road, which was sadly rendered unusable within a year after a fire broke out in the North Stand, instigated by a lit cigarette buzz. Clearly proof that smoking is bad for you. Despite potential reparations, the new stadium was sought after and Main Road became their new home in 1923, which would be the case for the next 80 years. Interestingly, Main Road held the record until 2018 for the highest attendance for a league game, but not for Man City, but instead for Manchester United, who played there whilst reparations to Old Trafford were taking place after the World War II, as the stadium had been severely damaged during German air raids. The 1930s saw City heavily challenged for silverware, winning the FA Cup in 1934, after which their goalkeeper, Frank Swift, aged just 19 at the time, fainted. They went on to win the league for the first time in their history in 1937, but what was predictable about City was their unpredictability, and they were relegated the year after, becoming the only team to be relegated in the season after they became champions. Despite scoring the second most goals in the division that season, they also conceded the most and went down in second to last place. One of a few incidents which City are remembered for by a certain vintage came in the 1956 FA Cup final, after their German goalkeeper Bert Trautmann, who was originally a prisoner of war in England, collided with a Birmingham player heavily. Even though he was in severe pain, he carried on till the end of the game. Bear in mind, there were no substitutes in those days, even for goalkeepers, even crashing into another Birmingham City player by the end of the match. Upon further scans, it was revealed that Trautmann had suffered a broken neck, dislocating 5 vertebrae, and was mere inches away from death, according to various doctors, perhaps only being saved as one vertebra wedged into another. And he finished the game. Let's just emphasise that point. He finished the game.
Mental.
The first golden age in City's history arrived in the late 1960s, proof that clearly it wasn't all about the 2010s. Colin Bell, Mike Summerby, Francis Lee and the late Glenn Pardo were the main players, but of course there were a myriad of others who contributed to their success. Joe Mercer and Malcolm Allison became the manager and assistant manager duo which brought about this great success. Winning Division 2 in 1966, the First Division in 1968 for the second time in their history, the FA Cup in 1969, and the League Cup and European Cup Winners' Cup in 1970. So vast was their success that Allison allegedly spoke to Mercer in a concerned manner after their last triumphs in 1970, but it was only because they hadn't won anything in 1967 and they were trying to figure out what went wrong that year. Allison was a crafty figure in and of himself. Rarely seen without a cigar, his greatest ploy as City assistant manager was in the process of him signing Colin Bell, who went on to become the greatest player of the club's history pre-Sheikh Mansour. He told the press that Bell was absolutely rubbish and that no one should raise an interest in him, as they'd be wasting money. As such, Bell's price went down, City snapped him up, and he played a pivotal role in City's successes over the next few seasons. Whilst not the greatest manager himself, he was the perfect foil to the more laid-back and relaxed Mercer, and the two achieved success at the club which had never been seen before and wasn't seen again until 2011 to 2020. One of City's greatest triumphs occurred a few years after those successes in 1974, when they relegated their arch-rivals Manchester United at the Theatre of Dreams. Dennis Law, who forms 1/3 of the Holy Trinity statue outside Old Trafford alongside Bobby Charlton and George Best, backheeled a winner for City during that game, with his last touch in football. Immediately, he asked to leave the pitch, stating that he felt sick, and retired immediately out of sheer embarrassment. I'm not sure City fans really cared. In reality, United would have been relegated anyway, but the fans stormed the pitch in a desperate attempt to try and get the game abandoned. They succeeded in doing so, but the result nonetheless stood. Their last trophy of the 20th century came in the 1976 League Cup final, as Dennis Stewart acrobatically scored a winner against Newcastle United in that League Cup final to win the game 2-1 for City, but no trophies would follow, or major trophies at least, until 2011. They were relegated from the Premier League in 1996, as they were told that they only needed a draw against Liverpool to stay up, about 20 minutes from the end of their game against them. But unfortunately, it dawned on them a few minutes later, perhaps 10-15 minutes later or so, that they actually needed a win and that they'd been wasting time passing the ball around when actually they desperately needed a goal to stay up. The goal didn't arrive and City went down, and they would do so again 2 seasons later in 1998, dropping into the 3rd tier for the first time in their history. When they got to that division, it really did look like the club would have gone out of business, and they might have done so if it weren't for that famous playoff final in 1999. They played against Gillingham in that final, but were losing 2-0 heading into the 90th minute. But Kevin Horlock pulled a goal back, and Paul Dickoff equalised with a stunning rifle into the roof of the net in the 94th minute, meaning that the game went to extra time and then eventually a penalty shootout. Nicky Weaver, a local lad, was the hero, saving a few Gillingham penalties before running a length of the pitch and doing a lap of honour around the Wembley turf. Not really sure what he was doing, but clearly caught up in the moment, saving his boyhood club from an embarrassment of staying in the 3rd tier for another season, and potentially from going out of business. One of the more bizarre incidents in the club's history arrived in 2005, as City, needing to beat Middlesbrough to qualify for Europe that season, were chasing a winner. Bear in mind that it was Borough who they needed to overtake in the table. Stuart Pearce's tactical masterstroke to try and find the winner? Well, it was bringing on Nicky Weaver for Claudio Reyna. Bear in mind that Claudio Reyna is a midfielder and Weaver a goalkeeper, and chucking David James, a goalkeeper as well, up front, leaving a striker in John Macken on the bench. Imagine how you must have felt where a goalkeeper is more entrusted up front than a natural striker who is paid to score goals. As you might have guessed, it didn't work, although City did miss a penalty through Robbie Fowler, which would have clinched Europe for next season. And maybe they might have reached the UEFA Cup final in 2006 instead of Middlesbrough. But 2 years later, Thaksin Shinawatra, the ex-Thai president, invested in the club and bought a lot of dross, admittedly, as well as Elano. Big up yourself. But his team didn't live up to the billing, being thrashed 8-1 by Middlesbrough again on the final day of the 2007-2008 season. The club virtually went under as Shinawatra's assets in Thailand, which amounted to a staggering £800 million, were frozen, and loans were needed to keep the club afloat. Then, the unthinkable happened. Sheikh Mansour, on deadline day of the transfer window in 2008, became the majority shareholder in the club, purchasing it for £220 million that summer. The rest, as they say, is history. 4 Premier Leagues, 2 FA Cups, 5 League Cups. Not quite European success just yet, but it is coming, make no mistake about it. And 2 FFP bans, or suspensions, or fines by UEFA, as they pumped money into the club, which they didn't actually own, and/or went over the loss limit. Clearly, 1906 City and 2020 City have something in common. And also, with regards to them having no fans, they regularly average 52 or 53,000 fans per game. I think that proves my point. And that wraps up today's video on the history of Manchester City. I know I could have done it in the Football Alphabet series, but I thought it would be good to, dispel these myths of no fans and no history and all that kind of stuff as soon as I possibly could. I may yet include them in the Football Alphabet, I don't know yet, but we'll see. But if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, comment down below with what you think, and also comment down below with any other suggestions of clubs that you want me to profile separately. And of course, whilst you're here, please hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you get notified when I upload a video every single time I do so. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you then.